I stood on my own front porch at 2:47 p.m., holding groceries for a granddaughter who would never eat them, staring at locks that didn't recognize the keys I'd carried for 37 years. The brass key that had opened this door through blizzards, birthdays, and breakdowns now slipped uselessly against metal that had been changed while I bought Emma's favorite cereal. My hand shook as I tried again, then again, the grocery bags cutting into my wrists like the realization cutting into my chest. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I knocked instead, my own front door, the door I'd hung myself in 1987 when David was still small enough to hand me nails. The sound echoed hollow, unfamiliar. When it opened, Rebecca stood there with that smile I'd learned to dread, the one that meant she'd already won something I didn't know I'd lost. "Harry," she said, not moving aside. "What are you doing here?" "I live here." The words felt strange in my mouth. "I was getting groceries for Emma." "Oh." She glanced at the bags, then back at my face. "Harry, we need to talk. David and I discussed it. This isn't working anymore." I felt my chest tighten. "What isn't working?" "You living here? This arrangement? It's not healthy for any of us." She stepped onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind her. "Especially not for Emma." "Where's David?" "At work. But he agrees with me completely. We both think it's time you found your own place." The groceries slipped from my hands. Milk splattered across the porch boards I'd replaced last spring. "This is my house, Rebecca. This is my house now, Harry. David and I discussed it. You're not family anymore." The words hit like physical blows. "I built this house, board by board, nail by nail. Built it for your son, not for some bitter old man living in the past." She crossed her arms. "David's 36 years old. He needs his own space with his wife and daughter, without his father hanging around, making everyone uncomfortable." Through the window I saw Emma watching us, her small face pressed against the glass. When she saw me looking, she waved. I waved back, but Rebecca stepped into my line of sight. "The locks have been changed," she said simply. "David has your clothes packed. They're in the garage. You can't do this. We already have." She reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. "There's $500 in here. Enough for a motel for a week or two while you figure things out." I stared at the envelope like it was poisonous. $500 for the house I built for 37 years. For being realistic about the situation, her voice softened, but her eyes stayed cold. "Harry, you're 72 years old. David has his own family now. This was always going to happen eventually. Where am I supposed to go? That's not really our problem anymore." But it wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. I looked at the door behind her, solid oak that had cost me 3 weeks' wages in 1987. The windows I'd installed when David was learning to walk. The porch where I'd taught him to tie his shoes. "I want to talk to David. David's made his choice. He chose his wife and daughter, like any good father would." She held out the envelope again. "Take it, Harry. Make this easy on everyone." I took the money, not because I accepted it, but because my hands were shaking and I needed something to hold. "What did you tell Emma?" "I told her the truth. That grandparents don't live with families forever. That you'll find your own place and visit sometimes. Visit my own house. David's house now." She stepped back toward the door. "I'm sorry it worked out this way, Harry. I really am, but this is what's best for everyone." The door closed with a soft click, the same door that had slammed 1,000 times when David was a teenager, that had creaked open at midnight when I'd checked on him during thunderstorms, that had welcomed neighbors and friends and family for decades. Now it was a barrier between me and everything I'd built. I stood there for 20 minutes, staring at that door, holding $500 and a lifetime of confusion. Cars passed on the street. Mrs. Henderson next door pretended not to watch from her kitchen window. The milk soaked into the porch boards, leaving a stain that would be there long after I was gone. Finally, I walked to the garage. My clothes were indeed packed, 3 garbage bags and a suitcase I recognized from a trip David and I had taken to Yellowstone when he was 12. Everything I owned in the world reduced to what could fit in the trunk of my old Buick. But that wasn't the worst thing she did. As I loaded my life into my car, I found a note tucked under my shaving kit in Rebecca's handwriting. David agrees this is for the best. Don't make this harder than it has to be. The note was dated 3 weeks ago. Room 237 at the Sleepy Inn cost me $89 a night. Money I'd been saving for Emma's college fund, now paying to sleep 6 miles from the home I'd never left. The room smelled like cigarettes and disappointment, with a water stain on the ceiling that looked like a question mark. I sat on the bed that creaked under my weight and called David's number. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. The third time I left a message. David, it's Dad. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. Call me back. He didn't call back that night, or the next morning. By Tuesday I'd left 6 messages and received 1 text. Dad, I need some space right now. This is hard for all of us. Space. From the man who'd raised him alone after his mother died when he was 14. Space from the man who'd worked double shifts at the construction site to pay for his college, who'd co-signed his first car loan, who'd held his hand in the hospital when Emma was born. I stared at my reflection in the motel room mirror and tried to understand what had happened. When had I become the enemy? When had providing for my family become interfering? When had loving my son become a burden he needed space from? But I didn't know then that my entire life was about to be turned upside down in ways I couldn't imagine. The truth started coming in pieces. Small things I'd dismissed before suddenly made sense. Like how Rebecca always seemed to know my schedule, always had a comment ready when I came home from errands or doctor appointments. Harry, you're out a lot for someone your age. Harry, maybe you should consider that senior center. They have activities. Or how she'd started redirecting my mail. Oh, that came for you yesterday. I put it somewhere safe, but when I'd ask for it, she'd forgotten where. The calls started coming Wednesday morning. First the electric company. Mr. Mitchell, we received a change of address form for your account. Can you confirm your new billing address? I haven't moved. Our records show a Rebecca Mitchell called to transfer service. Is she authorized on your account? She wasn't, but she'd apparently convinced them she was. Then the phone company, the water department, the property tax office. All the same story. Rebecca Mitchell had called, claiming to be handling my affairs because I was no longer capable of managing them myself. The bank was different. When I walked in Thursday morning, Linda Morrison, the manager I'd known for 15 years, looked uncomfortable. Harry, I'm glad you came in. We've had some unusual activity on your account. What kind of activity? Someone's been calling about your mortgage, asking about transfer procedures, payoff amounts. They claim to be your son. David wouldn't do that without talking to me. It wasn't David, it was a woman. Said she was handling your finances now because of your... What condition? Linda looked even more uncomfortable. She mentioned memory issues. Said the family was concerned about your ability to manage your affairs. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What did you tell her? Nothing. We don't give out information without proper documentation. But Harry, if there are concerns about your mental state, we should discuss setting up some safeguards. There are no concerns about my mental state. I know that, but she was very convincing, very detailed about your situation. Driving home, driving to the motel that wasn't home, I started putting pieces together. Rebecca hadn't just changed the locks on impulse. This had been planned, carefully, methodically, for weeks, maybe months. My phone rang at 4:17 p.m. Dad, I got your messages. David, we need to talk. Face to face. I know this is hard, but maybe it's for the best. Becca says you've been struggling lately, forgetting things, getting confused. I'm not confused, I'm being set up. Silence. Then, Dad, that's exactly the kind of thing that worries us. This paranoia, these accusations. They're not accusations if they're true. Becca loves you. We both love you, but love means knowing when to step back and let someone find their own way. Their own way. Is that what you call it? Dad, maybe this is for the best. Bakaka says you need to find your own path. The line went quiet. I could hear voices in the background. Rebecca's voice specifically, though I couldn't make out words. David, are you happy with how this happened? Another pause. Dad, I love you, but I have to choose my wife and daughter first. After he hung up, I sat in that motel room and stared at my reflection in the dark window. 36 years I raised that boy. This is how it ends. But it wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Margaret Chen's law office smelled like leather and justice, and the manila folder she placed in front of me contained 37 years of my life reduced to 12 pages. I'd called Margaret Thursday night after David hung up on me. She'd been my lawyer since I'd first bought the house, had handled my wife's estate when she passed, had helped me set up my will when Emma was born. Harry, I reviewed everything last night after you called. The good news is straightforward. The house is entirely in your name. Rebecca has no legal claim to it whatsoever. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders, so I can go home. Legally, yes, but there are complications. She opened the folder and spread documents across her desk. Rebecca's been busy, Harry. Very busy and very sloppy. What do you mean? She pointed to a stack of papers. Forged utility transfer requests, attempts to change your mailing address, phone calls to your bank claiming to be your legal representative. And this, she held up a document that made my blood run cold. Forged power of attorney with your signature. I never signed that. I know, the signature's not even close, but she's been using it to try to access your accounts, transfer services, even inquire about selling the house. For how long? Based on these dates. Almost 2 years. 2 years, while I'd been living in my own home, cooking Sunday dinners for David and Emma, helping with homework and household repairs, Rebecca had been systematically trying to steal my life. Can we prosecute? Oh yes. Document fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. We have multiple felony charges here. Margaret leaned back in her chair. The question is whether you want to. What do you mean? David's involved, Harry. Maybe not directly, but he's certainly benefiting from this. If we prosecute Rebecca, it'll destroy their marriage, probably cost him custody of Emma, definitely ruin his reputation at work. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Emma's face at the window watching me leave, about David's voice on the phone, distant and cold, about Rebecca's practiced smile as she handed me $500 for 37 years of my life. What would you do? Honestly, I'd give her enough rope to hang herself. She's not very good at this, Harry. She's going to make a mistake, and when she does, we'll be ready. I looked at the forged power of attorney again. My name but not my handwriting. Clumsy, desperate. What kind of mistake? The kind that leaves no doubt about her intentions. The kind that even David can't ignore. Margaret was right about one thing. Rebecca wasn't very good at fraud, but she was persistent. Over the next week she called my bank 3 more times, tried to redirect my Social Security checks, and even contacted a real estate agent about helping her father-in-law sell his property. Every call was documented. Every forged signature was photographed. Every lie was recorded. But I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was remembering things. Small things that hadn't seemed important before, but now felt like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Like how Rebecca had insisted on handling all the household bills after David married her. Let me take that burden off you, Harry. You've done enough. Or how she'd gradually started excluding me from family decisions. Oh, we already discussed that while you were at the store. David and I think it's better this way. Or how she'd started talking about Emma like she was exclusively hers and David's. Our daughter needs stability. Our daughter deserves better. Our daughter shouldn't have to deal with. The word she never finished was always you. I didn't know then that I was about to discover something that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Emma called me crying at 11:43 p.m., whispering into the phone, "Grandpa, Mommy says you're not my real grandpa, is that true?" Her voice was so small, so confused, that it broke something inside my chest that had been cracking for days. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She said, "You're not really family. That real grandpas don't get sent away. That real grandpas wouldn't abandon their granddaughters." I gripped the phone tighter. Through the thin motel walls, I could hear a television playing an old western. John Wayne's voice talking about justice and doing what's right. "Sweetheart, real family never goes away. Remember that." "But you went away." "I didn't want to go away. I was asked to leave." "By Mommy?" "Yes." "Why?" How do you explain betrayal to an 8-year-old? How do you tell a child that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, Emma. Sometimes they get confused about what's important. "Are you coming back?" Before I could answer, I heard Rebecca's voice in the background. "Emma, who are you talking to?" The line went quiet except for whispered conversation I couldn't make out. Then Rebecca's voice, clear and sharp. "Give me that phone. Grandpa, I have to go." "Emma, wait." The line went dead. I sat in that motel room holding a silent phone and thinking about Rebecca's words. "You're not my real grandpa." Why would she say that to Emma? What possible purpose could it serve except to hurt a little girl who'd already lost enough? But as I replayed the conversation, something else bothered me. Something I'd pushed aside for years because it seemed petty, seemed like the kind of observation that made you look foolish if you were wrong. Emma didn't look like David. She didn't look like me. She didn't look like any of the Mitchell family photos I'd studied over the years, searching for family resemblances the way grandparents do. She had Rebecca's dark hair, but not Rebecca's sharp features. Her nose was different. Her chin was different. Even her hands were different. Small and delicate where David's had always been broad and strong like mine. I'd mentioned it once, years ago when Emma was maybe 3. Funny how genetics work. I'd said to David, "She doesn't look much like either of you." Rebecca had laughed. "She looks exactly like my mother at that age. It's uncanny, really." But I'd never seen photos of Rebecca's mother at any age. Rebecca claimed her family lived across the country, that they weren't close, that she preferred to focus on the future rather than the past. Now, sitting in room 237 of the Sleepy Inn, I wondered what else Rebecca preferred not to discuss about her past. The next morning I drove past the house. My house. Emma was in the front yard, drawing with chalk on the sidewalk I'd poured myself in 1989. When she saw my car, she ran toward the street, but Rebecca appeared from nowhere and grabbed her arm, pulling her back toward the house. Rebecca stared at me through my windshield with eyes that held no warmth, no guilt, no recognition of any relationship we'd ever had. She was looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was a threat. Maybe I was. But that night, lying in a bed that wasn't mine in a room that smelled like other people's disappointments, I made a decision that would change everything. If Rebecca wanted to play games with family, I'd show her what family really meant. And I'd start with the truth about Emma. Dr. Coleman's voice was steady when she called at 3:15 p.m., but the 2 words she spoke made my hands shake. Not related. I was sitting in my car outside the DNA testing lab, having just dropped off samples I'd collected over the past week, strands of Emma's hair from a brush I'd retrieved from my old bathroom, and David's coffee cup from his office when I'd surprised him there on Tuesday. "Are you absolutely certain?" 99.99% certainty. I've run it twice. Dr. Coleman's voice was professional but gentle. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry. There's no genetic relationship between David and Emma." I closed my eyes and felt the world shift around me. 8 years. David had been raising another man's child for 8 years and he didn't know. "Doctor, is there any chance of error with these results?" "No. The samples you provided were excellent quality, and the markers are clear. David Mitchell is not Emma's biological father." After I hung up, I sat in that parking lot for an hour, watching people walk in and out of the medical building, going about their normal lives while mine collapsed and rebuilt itself around this one devastating fact. Rebecca hadn't just manipulated David into marriage, she'd trapped him with another man's child and made him believe it was his own. The pregnancy had been the turning point. I remembered it clearly now. David had been dating Rebecca for 6 months when she announced she was pregnant. He'd been 28, working construction with me, talking about maybe going back to school for project management. The pregnancy changed everything. "I have to do the right thing, Dad," he'd told me. "I love her and this baby needs a father." They'd married quickly, quietly, in a courthouse ceremony that felt more like a business transaction than a celebration. Rebecca had worn a simple dress that barely showed her pregnancy, and David had looked nervous, excited, and terrified all at once. Emma had been born 7.5 months later. Premature, Rebecca had explained, but healthy. The doctors had kept her in the hospital for a week, and Rebecca had been very specific about visiting hours, very protective about who could see the baby when. I'd thought it was new mother anxiety. Now I realized it was something else entirely. Driving back to the motel, I tried to process what this meant. Emma, the little girl I'd read bedtime stories to, taught to ride a bicycle, helped with homework, bought Christmas presents for, she wasn't my granddaughter. David, the son I'd raised alone after his mother died, had been lied to about the most fundamental fact of his relationship with his child. And Rebecca had been planning to steal my house for 2 years, using a lie that had shaped 8 years of our family's life. My phone rang at 6:30 p.m. Margaret Chen. "Harry, I've been reviewing Rebecca's recent activities. She's accelerated her timeline. She tried to list your house with a real estate agent yesterday." "She what?" "Forged your signature on a listing agreement. The agent called me because something seemed off. The signature didn't match the one on file from when you bought the house." I told Margaret about the DNA results. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for almost a minute. "Harry, this changes everything. If David isn't Emma's father, then Rebecca's entire claim to being part of your family is based on fraud. What do we do?" "We document everything, and then we give her exactly what she's been asking for." "What do you mean?" "She wants you out of David's life. She wants your house. She wants your family." Margaret's voice was cold, calculating. "Let's see how she likes getting what she wants." That night I sat in room 237 holding a manila envelope that contained the power to destroy Rebecca's world. The DNA report. Copies of the forged documents. A timeline of her attempts to steal my property. Evidence of her systematic campaign to isolate me from my son. But I also held the power to destroy David's world, to tell him that the little girl he loved wasn't his daughter, to show him that his marriage was built on a lie that had cost him his relationship with his father. Some truths were weapons, and I was about to learn how to use them. The weight of that knowledge settled into my bones like winter cold that never quite leaves. I had the power to shatter Rebecca's perfect life, but using it would shatter David's life too. And Emma, innocent, beautiful Emma, would be caught in the middle of an explosion she'd never understand. But Rebecca had made her choice 8 years ago when she decided to trap my son with another man's child. She'd made it again 2 years ago when she'd started forging my documents. She'd made it every day since then, every time she'd poisoned David against me, every time she'd told Emma I wasn't really family. Now it was time for me to make mine. I knocked on my own front door at exactly 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, carrying a manila envelope that would either reunite my family or destroy it forever. Rebecca answered after 3 knocks, and when she saw me standing there with that envelope, something flickered behind her eyes. Not surprise, recognition, like she'd been expecting this moment. "Harry, David's not home. I know, I came to talk to you." She didn't invite me in, didn't step aside. We stood on the porch I'd built, separated by 34 years of family history and one woman's web of lies. "What do you want?" I held up the envelope. "To give you a choice." "What kind of choice?" The kind that determines whether you leave here with some dignity intact or whether you leave here in handcuffs. Her face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but Emma's not his daughter. We both know who she is. The mask slipped. For just a moment, Rebecca's carefully composed face cracked, and I saw fear, raw, desperate fear. You can't prove anything. David will never believe you over me. DNA doesn't lie, Rebecca. Unlike people. She glanced behind her, then stepped onto the porch and pulled the door closed. I want you to tell David the truth. All of it. Emma's real father, the forged documents, the 2-year plan to steal my house, everything. And if I don't, I opened the envelope and showed her the DNA report. Then I will, along with all of this. I showed her copies of the forged power of attorney, the documented phone calls to my bank, the real estate listing agreement with my forged signature. She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Where did you get these? From your mistakes. You're not as smart as you think you are, Rebecca. You don't understand. I did this for Emma, to secure her future. You did this for yourself. Emma was just the excuse. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. What's to stop me from telling David you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're making up wild stories, because you can't accept that he chose his wife over his father? Because the DNA test isn't a story. The forged documents aren't a story. And deep down, David knows something's wrong. He's known it for months, maybe years. Rebecca leaned against the porch railing, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked her age, tired, cornered. What exactly are you proposing? You have until tomorrow night to tell David everything. If you don't, I will. And then what? Even if he believes you, what happens to Emma? You'll destroy that little girl's life just to get revenge on me. I'm not destroying anything, Rebecca. You already did that 8 years ago. She straightened up and the mask slipped back into place. You're assuming David will choose you over his wife and daughter. That's a hell of a gamble for a bitter old man with nowhere else to go. Rebecca, I'm giving you one chance to do this with dignity. Dignity. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. From the man who's been stalking his own family, collecting DNA samples like some kind of detective. From the man whose house you're trying to steal, whose family you've been systematically destroying for 2 years. Go to hell, old man. This is still my house. She turned toward the door, but I caught her arm. Not hard, just enough to make her stop. Rebecca, look at me. She turned back, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Not fear, not anger, defeat. I raised David alone from the time he was 14. I worked double shifts to pay for his college. I held him when his mother died. I taught him to be a good man, an honest man, a man who believes in family and truth and doing what's right. My voice was quiet, steady. You think he's going to choose a lie over his father? He already has. No, he chose what he thought was best for his family. There's a difference. She pulled her arm free. You have no idea what you're doing. You have no idea what this will cost all of us. I know exactly what it will cost. The question is whether you're going to pay it with some dignity, or whether I'm going to take it from you. She stared at me for a long moment, then opened the front door. David will be home at 7 tomorrow. If you want to destroy your son's life, that's on you. The door closed with the same soft click it had made the day she'd locked me out. But this time, I wasn't the one walking away defeated. I had 24 hours to decide whether justice was worth the price it would demand from everyone I loved. David's face went white, then red, then completely blank when I handed him the DNA report at his office in front of his coworkers at 2:30 p.m. on Wednesday. I'd waited for Rebecca to make her choice. She hadn't. She'd called David that morning and told him I was having mental health issues, that I'd been making threats, that he should consider getting a restraining order. So I'd made my choice too. Dad, this has to be wrong. Emma is my daughter. I watched my son's world collapse in real time, watched 8 years of fatherhood crumble into question marks and doubt. His hands shook as he held the report. his eyes scanning the same lines over and over as if the words might change. "Son, look at the report. Then look at her. Really look. This is impossible. Rebecca was pregnant when we got married. I was there when Emma was born. Rebecca was pregnant, but not with your child." The construction office had gone quiet around us. David's co-workers pretended to be busy with their own projects, but I could feel them listening, could see them glancing over at the drama unfolding in their midst. David stood up from his desk, walked to the window, came back. Why would she lie about something like this? Because she needed a father for her baby, and you were a good man who would do the right thing. 8 years, Dad. 8 years I've been raising her. She calls me Daddy. She looks for me when she's scared. His voice broke. David, you are her father in every way that matters, but you deserve to know the truth. He picked up his phone with trembling hands. "I'm calling Rebecca. Put it on speaker." He hesitated, then pressed the speaker button. Rebecca answered on the second ring. "David, is everything okay? You sound upset." "Becca, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me the truth." Silence. "Then what's wrong? Is Emma my daughter?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Rebecca finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "David, please, I can explain everything. Just answer the question. Is Emma my biological daughter?" "Biology doesn't matter. You've been her father since the day she was born. You love her. She loves you. That's what matters." David's face crumpled. "That's not an answer. David, please, can we talk about this at home? This isn't something to discuss over the phone. Explain 8 years of lies." I was scared. I was 26 and pregnant and alone. My boyfriend, Emma's biological father, he left when I told him about the baby. I couldn't raise her by myself. I needed help. "So you trapped me." "No, I fell in love with you. Real love. And you fell in love with me. And when Emma was born, you fell in love with her too. That's not a trap. That's a family." David was crying now, openly in front of his coworkers and his father and anyone else who might be listening. "You let me believe she was mine. She is yours. In every way that matters, she's yours. But she's not mine. Her first word, her first steps, her first day of school, I was celebrating another man's child. You were celebrating your daughter. Nothing changes that. Everything changes that." David's voice cracked with fury and grief. "Everything changes when the foundation of your family is built on a lie." The office had gone completely silent now. David's supervisor appeared at his elbow with a gentle hand on his shoulder. "David, why don't you take the rest of the day off?" David nodded, still holding the phone, still staring at the DNA report. "Rebecca, I'm coming home. We need to talk." "David, please, think about Emma. Think about what this conversation will do to her." "I am thinking about Emma. I'm thinking about how her mother has been lying to her father for 8 years. After he hung up, David sat in his chair and stared at his hands. "Dad, what am I supposed to do with this?" "Whatever you think is right, but you deserve to know the truth." "Does Emma know?" "Rebecca's been telling her I'm not really her grandfather. Maybe this is why." David looked up at me with eyes that held more pain than any father should have to see in his child's face. "I got the results yesterday. I came here as soon as I made copies for the lawyer." "The lawyer?" I showed him the forged documents, the evidence of Rebecca's attempts to steal my house, the systematic campaign to isolate me from my family. By the time I finished explaining, David was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "She planned all of this. For 2 years at least, maybe longer. The house, getting you to move out, turning me against you." He put his head in his hands. "Oh God, Dad, what have I done?" "You believed your wife. You tried to protect your family. There's no shame in that. I chose her over you. You chose what you thought was right." David stood up slowly, like an old man carrying too much weight. "I need to go home. I need to look at my daughter and figure out how to tell her that everything she knows about her family is a lie. David, whatever happens between you and Rebecca, Emma doesn't have to pay for her mother's choices, doesn't she? How do I look at her now without seeing him, whoever he is? The same way you looked at her yesterday. She's still Emma. She still needs her father. But I'm not her father. You've been her father for 8 years. That doesn't disappear because of a DNA test. David picked up the report one more time, stared at the numbers that had destroyed his marriage and his trust and his understanding of his own life. I don't know how to forgive this. You don't have to forgive it, but you can survive it. Can I? Can we? I thought about the last 3 weeks. The changed locks, the motel room, the systematic betrayal of everything I'd thought I knew about my family. We're stronger than we know, son. We're going to have to be. Judge Williams looked at Rebecca like she was examining something unpleasant on her shoe when she read the fraud charges, the DNA report, and the forged documents. The family court was small, institutional, with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sick. Rebecca sat with her lawyer, a young man who'd clearly realized he was in over his head. David sat beside me, staring at his hands. Mrs. Mitchell, you've committed fraud against a 72-year-old man who trusted you as family. Rebecca stood when the judge addressed her. Your Honor, I just wanted to secure my daughter's future. By stealing from your daughter's grandfather? I don't think so. Judge Williams set the papers down and looked directly at Rebecca. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You married Mr. Mitchell's son under false pretenses, convinced him that your child was his biological offspring, then spent 2 years systematically attempting to defraud his father out of his property and assets. It's not that simple. It seems quite simple to me. Mr. Chen, what are we looking at in terms of charges? Margaret stood. Your Honor, we have documented evidence of identity theft, document fraud, attempted real estate fraud, and elder abuse. The defendant has been forging Mr. Mitchell's signature for over 2 years, attempting to redirect his mail, access his bank accounts, and transfer ownership of his property. And the marriage, based on fraudulent representation of paternity, Your Honor, Mr. David Mitchell was led to believe he was the father of the defendant's child, which influenced his decision to marry her. Judge Williams turned to David. Mr. Mitchell, what is your position regarding custody of the minor child? David cleared his throat. Your Honor, regardless of biology, Emma has been my daughter for 8 years. I want to maintain custody and protect her from any instability this situation might create. And regarding your marriage, I'm filing for divorce. I can't stay married to someone who's been lying to me for 8 years. The judge nodded and turned back to Rebecca. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm awarding full ownership of the disputed property to Harold Mitchell effective immediately. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. I'm also issuing a restraining order preventing you from contacting Mr. Harold Mitchell or attempting to access any of his financial accounts or property. Your Honor, where am I supposed to go? That's been my home for 8 years. You should have considered that before you decided to steal it. Judge Williams signed several documents. As for the criminal charges, Mr. Chen, I assume the district attorney will be filing those separately. Yes, Your Honor. Then we're done here. The judge stood. Mrs. Mitchell, I suggest you use the next 48 hours to secure alternative housing and legal counsel. You're going to need both. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Not joy exactly, but a kind of quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served. The truth had been told. The lies had been exposed. But David walked beside me like a man attending his own funeral. Dad, what happens now? Now you go home, you pack Rebecca's things, you explain to Emma that sometimes families change, but love doesn't. How do I explain this to an 8-year-old? You tell her that you're her father, that I'm her grandfather, and that some people make mistakes but family forgives each other. What about Rebecca? I thought about the woman who'd tried to steal my house, my family, my relationship with my son, who'd lied to a little girl about her grandfather, lied to a good man about his daughter, lied to herself about the kind of person she was. Rebecca made her choices, now she gets to live with them. That evening I stood in my driveway and watched Rebecca load her car with garbage bags full of clothes and disappointment. David was inside with Emma trying to explain why Mommy was moving to a different house, but Daddy and Grandpa would still be there. Rebecca looked at me as she loaded the last bag into her trunk. "Are you happy now?" "I'm not happy or unhappy. I'm just home." "You destroyed my family." "You destroyed your own family the day you decided to build it on lies." She got in her car and rolled down the window. "Emma's going to ask about me. She's going to want to know why I left." And what should we tell her? Tell her that sometimes people make mistakes they can't fix. Rebecca's voice was quiet, empty of the anger and manipulation I'd grown used to. Tell her that I loved her. That part was never a lie. "I'll tell her that." She drove away without looking back. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner, carrying her toward whatever life she'd have to build from the ruins of the one she'd destroyed. Emma hugged my legs in the driveway of the house I built, whispering "I missed you, Grandpa," while Rebecca packed her lies into garbage bags. Her small arms around my knees felt like forgiveness, like homecoming, like the promise that some things survive even the worst betrayals. "Grandpa, are you really my grandpa?" I knelt down so we were eye to eye. "In every way that matters, sweetheart. Blood doesn't make family, love does." But Mommy said, "Sometimes people say things when they're scared or confused. What matters is what's in your heart. What does your heart tell you? That you're my grandpa and you love me and you came back." "That's right, and I'm never leaving again." David stood in the doorway watching us. When Emma ran inside to get her coloring books, he walked over to me. "Dad, I'm sorry. I should have trusted you." "Son, she was very good at what she did. Very good." "How did you know about Emma?" "I didn't know, I suspected. But I needed to be sure before I said anything." "What made you suspicious?" I thought about how to answer that. She didn't look like us. She didn't act like us. And Rebecca was always so protective about her past, about Emma's early years, little things that didn't add up. I should have seen it. You saw what you wanted to see. A man who loves his daughter. But she's not my daughter. "David, look at me." I waited until he met my eyes. "You changed her diapers. You walked the floors with her when she was teething. You taught her to ride a bike and helped her with homework and read her bedtime stories. You are her father in every way that matters." But the lie was Rebecca's, not yours, not Emma's. Don't punish that little girl for her mother's choices. Over the next few weeks we learned more about Rebecca's real story. She'd been involved with a married man, a lawyer from her hometown who'd refused to leave his wife when she got pregnant. She'd moved across the state, panicked and alone, and met David at a bar near the construction site where he was working. She'd seen a good man, a kind man, a man who would do the right thing if he thought a woman needed his help. So she'd seduced him, convinced him she was falling in love, and when she was sure he was hooked, she'd told him about the pregnancy. The timing had been calculated. She'd told David she was 6 weeks pregnant when she was actually 10 weeks along. When Emma was born early, the dates seemed to match. For 8 years she'd maintained the lie, building a life on a foundation of deception, and when I'd started to become inconvenient, asking too many questions, noticing too many inconsistencies, she'd decided to eliminate me from the equation entirely. But there was something else I learned during those weeks. Something that changed how I felt about everything that had happened. Rebecca had been sending money to someone in her hometown, regular payments every month for 8 years. When Margaret traced the payments, we discovered the truth. Rebecca had been supporting her mother, who was in a nursing home with dementia. Every dollar she'd stolen from me, every forged signature, every lie she'd told, it had all been to pay for her mother's care. She'd been desperate, cornered, trying to secure a future for Emma while caring for a parent who no longer recognized her. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained it. When I told David, he was quiet for a long time. Finally he said, "Does it change anything?" It changes how I feel about her, not what she did, but why she did it. Do you think Emma should know about her real father? Emma should know whatever will help her understand herself and her place in the world, but that's a conversation for when she's older. For now, she just needs to know she's loved. And Rebecca? I thought about the woman who'd tried to steal my house, who'd lied to my son, who'd poisoned my granddaughter against me. I also thought about the daughter who'd been sending money to her sick mother, who'd been trapped by her own desperation into a web of lies she couldn't escape. Rebecca gets to live with the consequences of her choices, but Emma doesn't have to pay for them. 3 months after the court hearing, Rebecca was working at a diner across town, living in a one-bedroom apartment, visiting Emma every other weekend under supervised custody. She'd pled guilty to the fraud charges and received probation and community service. Her dreams of easy wealth, of security built on someone else's foundation, had crumbled into minimum wage and government-assisted housing. But Emma was thriving. She spent weekdays with David and weekends with me, learning to garden and build birdhouses and understand that families come in all different shapes, but are held together by the same thing: commitment to each other's well-being. I was planting tomatoes in the garden when David found me, holding Emma's report card with tears in his eyes, finally understanding what family really means. The report card showed straight A's and a note from her teacher. Emma is a joy to have in class. She talks constantly about her father and grandfather and how much she's learning from both of them. Dad, how did you stay so calm through all of it? I set down my trowel and looked at my son who'd been lied to, manipulated, and used, but who'd survived it all with his integrity intact. Son, when you know you're right, you don't need to shout. But weren't you angry? I was furious. I was heartbroken. I was confused and hurt and ready to give up. I pointed to the tomato plants. But anger is like fertilizer. It only works if you use it to grow something better. Emma came running around the corner of the house, her hands dirty from helping me plant marigolds along the front walk. Grandpa, will you teach me to build things like you did? I picked her up. This little girl who carried another man's DNA but had somehow inherited my stubborn persistence and David's gentle heart. Everything worth having, Emma, is built with patience and truth. What about love? Love is what holds it all together. David put his arm around my shoulders, and for the first time in months, we stood together as a family, imperfect, complicated, built on truth instead of lies. 6 months later, Rebecca had found a new job as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. She was taking night classes to finish her degree. Her visits with Emma had become unsupervised, and while there was still tension between her and David, there was also a grudging respect for the fact that she was trying to rebuild her life honestly. The house settled back into rhythms I remembered from when David was young. Sunday dinners, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories, and the sound of a child's laughter echoing through rooms that had been too quiet for too long. I'd learned something about justice during those months. It wasn't about revenge or punishment or making someone pay for what they'd done wrong. It was about truth. About making sure that lies didn't become the foundation for the next generation's understanding of family and love and what people owe each other. Rebecca had lied, stolen, and manipulated her way into my family, but she'd also loved Emma, cared for her mother, and found herself trapped in circumstances that seemed impossible to escape without causing pain to everyone she cared about. In the end, the truth had set us all free. Free from the lies, free from the manipulation, free from the fear that love could be taken away by someone else's choices. Emma was drawing at the kitchen table when I finished planting the last of the summer flowers. She looked up when I came inside. "Grandpa, will you always live here?" "As long as you need me to, sweetheart. I'll always need you to. Then I'll always be here." David came home from work, hung his keys on the hook by the door, the same hook I'd installed 30 years ago, and kissed Emma on the top of her head. "How was school? Mrs. Patterson says I'm the best reader in 3rd grade. And Tommy Morrison asked if I wanted to be his girlfriend." David and I exchanged a look. "And what did you tell Tommy Morrison?" "I told him I already have 2 men in my life and that's enough for now." After Emma went to bed, David and I sat on the front porch, looking out at the street where he'd learned to ride a bike, where Emma now played with the neighborhood children, where 3 generations of Mitchells had called home. Do you think she'll be okay? Long term, I mean. Emma? She'll be better than okay. She'll be strong. How can you be sure? Because she survived the worst thing that can happen to a family, discovering that the foundation was built on lies, and she's still standing, still loving, still trusting. I looked at my son, just like you. I don't feel strong. Strong people never do. They just do what needs to be done day after day until one day they look back and realize they survived something they thought would destroy them. A car passed on the street, and for just a moment I thought it might be Rebecca, but it was just a neighbor coming home from work, living their own complicated life with their own difficult choices. Dad, do you forgive her? I thought about that question for a long time. Forgiveness seemed like the wrong word for what I felt about Rebecca. I didn't forgive her lies, her manipulation, her willingness to destroy a family to get what she wanted, but I understood her desperation, her fear, her impossible situation. I forgive the parts of her that were human, the parts that were scared and desperate and trying to protect the people she loved. I don't forgive the parts that were selfish and manipulative and willing to hurt innocent people to get what she wanted. Is that possible? To forgive part of someone but not all of them? I think that's the only kind of forgiveness that means anything. The kind that acknowledges that people are complicated, that they can be capable of both love and betrayal sometimes in the same moment. Emma's light went out upstairs. David and I sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of our neighborhood settling into evening. Dogs barking, televisions murmuring through open windows, the distant sound of traffic on the highway that connected our small world to all the larger worlds beyond it. Dad, what do you think would have happened if you hadn't found out, about Emma, I mean? Rebecca would have eventually succeeded in stealing the house. You would have grown up believing lies about your daughter and your father. Emma would have grown up not knowing who she really was. I paused, and I would have died in that motel room, forgotten and discarded by the family I'd spent my life building. That almost happened. But it didn't. Truth has a way of surfacing, son. It might take time, but it always finds a way. Even when people work hard to bury it? Especially then. The porch light flickered on automatically, triggered by the motion sensor I'd installed last month. Technology changes, but some things remain constant. The need for light in dark places, the importance of home, the power of truth to heal even the deepest wounds. I'm proud of you, David. For what? For choosing Emma over your anger. For choosing truth over comfort. For choosing to rebuild instead of just walking away. I learned from the best. We sat there until the streetlights came on. Father and son, grandfather and father, 2 men who'd survived betrayal and discovered that family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates or DNA tests. It's about showing up day after day for the people who need you to show up. It's about building something strong enough to survive the worst storms and humble enough to be rebuilt when necessary. It's about love that chooses itself over and over again until choosing becomes as natural as breathing. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about Harry's journey in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.